One of the easiest things to find if you're looking are caddy spoons. They were big fans of making caddy spoons. That one's a bit worn, but you see the design there. And you can also actually see, if I breathe on it, where it's joined with a little bit of solder there, and that's an open wirework handle. And you have exactly the same bowl shape from exactly the same die that it was struck in the factory on that, but it has a solid handle. And in this case, none of this decoration is engraved. Looks like bright cut decoration. Let's breathe on it. Looks like it, but of course, if you're engraving it, you're cutting through to the copper beneath. So basically what Sheffield manufacturers had were a series of punches that made the pattern that that engraving would have. So all the decoration, again, is struck into it. It's another way to tell whether it's been Sheffield plated or electroplated, where they would engrave it and then plate it afterwards. So you can feel all of that. You can feel the striking. You can see plainly on the reverse the impression of the decoration where it's been punched. And there's a slightly later one, and again this time die struck decoration, not hand struck in the bowl, that little bit of shell fluting. These can be very affordable. They're rare things, they're Georgian, but they appear in much larger quantities, so they can be sort of 30 pounds, even less if you're lucky. But it's always nice to find rare examples. The more elaborate they are, like this one with all of its simulated bright cut decoration and most of its plating, that might be 40 or 50 pounds, but they're rare. Much rarer as well are teaspoons. And the reason they're rarer is because when you're getting to a teaspoon, the weight of the silver it's not that important. So actually all the difficulty of making these in Sheffield plate and the ease of making them in silver quickly, it starts not to be worthwhile. But Sheffield plate manufacturers did make teaspoons, but again, they're rare. This is a pretty fantastic set because they have, let's just get this and breathe on them again. They have all that simulated bright cut decoration on them. But they also have initials, and the initials are engraved. And you're going to say, well, you said they couldn't engrave Sheffield plate. There were engravers that were able to just engrave at an angle to make that line without the copper obviously showing through. And sometimes, although not in this case, but sometimes the manufacturers sweated an extra little bit of pure silver where there was going to be engraving, and if you breathe on that, that will show up as a different colour under your breath. And again, that's a rubbed in cartouche. Rubbed in. It's one of the most difficult and well paid jobs to do if you were manufacturing Sheffield plate, but you could do that. And here's a very rare little teaspoon, all on its own, I'm afraid. And that's got die struck decoration, so it's got a shell and a little trail of flowers. But again, not really cost effective. There are some rarer things as well. These are very rare. Marrow scoops. We've only just done a marrow scoop a few weeks ago. Marrow scoops in Sheffield plate are rare things indeed. This is about 1717 date. It's nice and early. It's got the seam running down the sides here, so it's two pieces fused together. We've got a little pip on the bowl. It was hugely impractical to make something like a marrow scoop out of Sheffield plate. They did it for a bit, or at a peculiar client's request, but you will look probably forever to find one of those. And that's why one of these in Sheffield plate, not electroplate, remember, but Sheffield plate, is worth as much as one in silver. And it is, as I say, probably 100, if not 1,000 times rarer to find one of these. So it's worth looking for these examples. And finally, or nearly finally, because I've been going on quite a lot about this, grape shears or grape scissors, as they were known. And these are interesting. They're by Silk of Birmingham. They're stamped here. These are not, even though you're looking at them now, these are not Sheffield plate, strictly speaking. This section is steel because it has to cut through the stem of a bunch of grapes. So that is close plated. And that is basically taking a silver leaf, a very fine leaf of silver, and fusing it onto the steel. It's the only way you can do it. It's quite fugitive as well once you've done it, but you fuse it onto the steel. The handles are copper, and these are made in the dies of a Sheffield plater, but they have been stamped out as plain copper and then mercurially gilt. So in this case, rather than being 2 layers of a metal fused together, the copper, once it's been stamped out and soldered together, a gold paste is made, a mix of gold and mercury is put onto it and fired. The mercury fires off and you're left with a pure layer of gold. It's interesting that these two techniques are in this one object because close plating is probably the worst bond between silver and another metal. Most close plate you'll see will be in poor condition, and a lot of the plating will have worn off because it's sort of like sticking it on, and it just wants to go away. Whereas mercuric gilding on copper is a really strong bond. And actually, I'll show you, here's a little Georgian fiddle pattern egg spoon. Egg spoons were often entirely gilt because the sulphur in the egg doesn't react to the gold. But that's 200 years old, and it's seen wear and use. But look, almost all the gilding is pristine and in place. And that's simply because it forms this mercuric gilding process, which was incredibly dangerous, and nobody does it anymore because it's incredibly dangerous, formed an incredibly good bond. So something like these, I mean, these are very rare. I don't think you'll find another pair of mercuric gilt and close plate grape shears. But again, they're about 1810 in date, 1810, 1815. But they're so much rarer than the silver gilt ones you see. Not necessarily as valuable in that case, because a pair of silver gilt grape shears are going to be £200, £300, £400, but much rarer. Last thing, just in case we all get focused, those were made in Birmingham, in case we get focused that Sheffield is the place where all this stuff comes from. Sugar tongs. Get lots of pairs of plated sugar tongs, Sheffield plated sugar tongs of this period. These aren't terribly expensive when you see them. You find them online and they're often £5 or £10 a pair, depending on the condition or the decoration. Very elaborate ones are worth very much more, but they are rare examples. They're normally like this. These I have because they are, and as I say, with most of this stuff is unmarked. These are stamped with the maker's name, which is what makes them very rare. People have seen this mark before and thought it said patent because it was a patent process, but it actually says pattern. And it's for the partnership of Patten Mills and Westley of Birmingham. And they are principally wire drawers. They provide drawn wire for other manufacturers. And that gives you the clue to how these tongs were made. So you can see they're all flat and even. There's a bit of a pattern. It is a wire. It's a wire process. This is one drawn out piece of wire. The bowls have been flattened from one end, and the bow, that's been flattened in the middle. So it's one continuous piece of metal going through a process, being shaped and back. And a lot of these that are ascribed to Sheffield are in fact Birmingham made, drawn wire, Sheffield plate sugar tongs. Good God, I've gone on forever. I do apologise. That's trying to do one big subject in a little video. It doesn't always work, does it? That's a taster. If you've got any questions, let me know. If you like the look of any of it and want to become a collector of old Sheffield plates, flatware, or have an example, I can provide you with it. But until then, until next week, good antiques hunting and goodbye.